So I've had this stubble going on for the past 3 days, for the first 3 days of No Shave November, and honestly I'm hating it, so I'm gonna shave tomorrow. November's my birthday month, so I would like to actually look nice, clean shaven for my celebration. But enough about my facial hair. Let's talk about today's video. I was planning on doing this video in a couple weeks, but because of next Sunday's gospel reading, I decided to do it this week. And the title of this video is Jesus is a Rebel. I wanted to make this video because it seems like people tend to pacify Jesus. They tend to make him less of this rebel in Jewish society and more like a giant hippie, which can be known as hippie Jesus. And hippie Jesus would be someone who would be like, whoa, peace and love, man. God loves you. Everything's cool, man. I'm gonna die for everything. Yeah, man. And that's not exactly who Jesus was like. Honestly, Jesus was more like, I'm gonna go down to Judea and I'm gonna mess everything up. See, Jesus was more of a rebel. Not a rebel like the Zealots who wanted to overthrow Roman rule in Judea, but he was a rebel because he went against what people believed in Jewish society. So for this video, I'm going to point out some key times where Jesus was a rebel, and hopefully show that Jesus isn't this pacifist that everyone assumes him to be. He was a rabble rouser. That's why the Pharisees and the Sadducees had such a problem with him. So my first example is actually this Sunday's gospel reading, John chapter 2, verse 13 through 22. It's the story of when Jesus goes into the temple and he finds that there are moneylenders there and people selling livestock, and that really ticks him off. So he makes a whip, drives everyone out, and says that they're disgracing his father's house. And he started flipping over tables, which really puts a new twist on the phrase, what would Jesus do? Because if we literally take it, what would Jesus do? That means flipping tables is perfectly acceptable now. I'd give you an example of what that would look like, but I don't have a table with me right now, and I think my roommates would get kind of annoyed if I flipped over our kitchen table. I got this pop can though. I could drop it to the ground. Rebel! Woo! This was pretty rebellious because it seems like everyone else was perfectly happy with the money lending and the selling of livestock in the temple. It's the way that they had to do things back then, because people would come from all over the country and they didn't always have the same types of coins. So there would need to be moneylenders there, and people would want to make sacrifices, so they would have various livestock there so that people could sacrifice to God. But then Jesus comes along, and not only does he drive everyone out, but he said, you guys are wrong. I could destroy this temple and rebuild it in 3 days. And of course, he means the temple of his body, but everyone else is like, what? That's exactly what they were doing. The second example of Jesus being a rebel is that he would perform miracles on the Sabbath. And there are a lot of examples in the Bible about Jesus going and doing these miracles, healing people, bringing the dead back to life, and they were all on the Sabbath. To us, that may not seem like a very big deal, because in our society it's common to just do work on Sunday. It's not a big deal for us anymore. People have busy lives. But imagine that you were sitting in the middle of Mass, and there was some kid next to you who pulls out his Nintendo DS and starts playing Mario in the middle of the homily. That would tick you off, right? Well, that's how a lot of people in Jewish culture felt, that Jesus was disrespecting what they believed. And tradition and culture were so important for the Jewish people back then. These were people who had been attacked over and over and over again by the various kingdoms and various groups that had invaded the area for hundreds of years. And so even though they had been invaded by so many people, they still had their traditions and they had their culture to keep them grounded and not lose all hope that they were just some wandering tribe like they had been when they moved from Egypt to the Promised Land. So the fact that Jesus was disrespecting their tradition by performing miracles on the Sabbath, by talking to people who weren't Jewish, that made them pretty annoyed, and that branded Jesus as a rebel to them. I'm actually reading a book about the Apostle Paul right now, and it talks about how Paul was obsessed with the laws and the traditions of the Jewish faith, and that's why he was persecuting Christians for a good part of his life, is because he felt that they were disrespecting everything that the Jewish faith stood for. But then he falls off his horse, Jesus blinds him, asks him, "Why are you persecuting me?" And he turns into one of the founders of the church. See, it's easy to be a saint. And here's the final reason why Jesus was a rebel. Because he talked with everyone, and he loved everyone. And there are a lot of great examples of Jesus talking to people who were outcasted by society. One of the longest Sunday Gospels we have is Jesus talking to the woman at the well, a woman who had been cast out by her own group of people and was part of a group that the Jewish people were not fond of. Yet Jesus took the time to talk to her and try and bring her closer to God. He also talked and healed those who were crippled or diseased. A lot of people would have seen these people as unclean or sinful, but Jesus made sure to bless them and heal them from their afflictions. He fixed a man's hand. He made someone whose legs had never worked able to walk again. He made the blind man see. And he rose someone from the dead. That's pretty awesome. But were the Pharisees and Sadducees like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing, he's healing people"? No, they're like, "What is that man doing? I hate him." Again, that's exactly what they said. There's also the story of Jesus healing the daughter of the Roman centurion. The Jews were not fond of being under the control of the Romans, but there wasn't really anything they could do about it, so they kind of had to live with it and just hate the Romans under their breath. So when this Roman centurion comes to Jesus and asks him to help heal his daughter, Jesus doesn't get mad at him or toss him aside because he's Roman. No. He heals the man's daughter. Finally, he ate with tax collectors. Tax collectors in Jewish society were not particularly fond of, mostly because they were Jews themselves, but had been forced in this role by the Romans. And they didn't get paid for their position, so whenever they went to go and collect taxes, the tax collectors had to charge a little bit extra, or a lot extra probably, so that they could live and get a meal and own a house. So because they're taking extra money, they weren't particularly popular in Jewish society. But in the Bible, we have the story of Zacchaeus, who climbs a tree to go see Jesus when he's passing through a town. And Jesus calls Zacchaeus down and asks to have dinner with him. And most people would be like, "Why would you want to eat with a tax collector? Those guys are evil, they take our money." But Jesus knew that Zacchaeus was a good guy, and after spending just one evening with Jesus, Zacchaeus returns all the money that he had taken over the years. So Jesus was going around hanging out with tax collectors and the sick and the crippled. What's so bad about that? Well, Jesus also did tell everyone that salvation would be available for everyone. It wouldn't just be the Jews anymore, it would be the Greeks, the Gentiles, and basically anyone else who would accept God into their lives. And that is what really, really ticked everyone off, is that the Jewish people were no longer the one group that would get salvation and get to go spend eternity with God. Now, everyone would get it. They were at a loss. Their whole identity of being God's chosen people was gone. So what do they have now? Nothing. And that's why they were like, we really got to get rid of Jesus. Because if he's telling everyone gets salvation, then we got nothing. Now, some of the things that I've talked about may not seem like a very big deal to some people, but back then they were a pretty freaking big deal. And the fact that he also claimed to be the Son of God made everything a whole lot worse. So yeah, Jesus wasn't this huge hippie who told everyone to go around and love each other. He was a rebel. He was someone who stood up for what he believed in. And you know what? Sometimes when you're trying to reach people, you have to get a little messy at times. It's like Miss Frizzle always used to say, take chances, make mistakes, and get messy! Do you think the Magic School Bus ever went back to Jesus' time? That would be so cool. That is the one episode of Magic School Bus that I would love to see. You know, they brought back Reading Rainbow as an app. Why couldn't they bring back Magic School Bus? I would totally fund that. Thanks for watching this video, everyone. Be sure to subscribe to my channel. Be sure to go like Ain't They Catholic on Facebook. And the next time you see me, I will be a year older. Yay! 1 year closer to death. Woo! That is a terrible way to look at things. Alright, peace.